This podcast is produced by OnPod, a video content studio near you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are here with Kat. She is the owner of Cooking with Kat. She's a professor, a dietitian, who has a little bit more of a hands-on approach with her clients. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to get into it. How has your role as a part-time nutrition professor influenced your work with clients and your research focus?
So I guess I don't necessarily do tons of research right now actively, but obviously being a professor, it kind of forces me and encourages me to look at the most up-to-date evidence. And so it keeps me really up to date in my practice as well. So right now I teach mostly clinical courses. So I teach future dietitians how to help clients themselves. And so it really helps me to kind of review the most up-to-date guidelines when it comes to like digestive health, diabetes, weight management. And so it really helps in my practice as well in obviously having that information and being able to translate that information into practice and vice versa. Obviously, teaching clients and working with clients, I think really helps me in my teaching job too, to really show not only the theory, but like the practical implication and sort of the human side as well of behavior change and just supporting a client going through something, right? A new diagnosis or just day-to-day challenges that make healthy eating difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Like with the client, they're asking the questions that are directly impacting them. So you
hmm
can, translate those to your students. And I find it's very interesting as well that I'm sure your students write papers and you have to read those papers so you can see all these studies that they're kind of using as references. And that must be really nice to have it at the forefront of your attention.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in the program, I mean, it's less. There obviously are some like projects to be done, but a lot of the clinical courses is very much like case studies and what would you do in this instance. So it's interesting to see their thought process, and it also keeps me in check and keeps me constantly kind of assessing my own approach too, of seeing like, okay, does it really reflect the latest guidelines, but also, could I have done something differently if I really take that systematic approach that I'm teaching my students? So I find it really helps in both roles, and it's such a great blend that's often seen in like medicine or other disciplines. And so I find it really neat to implement that in the nutrition field, which is not super common to see both together.
Yeah, that must be really awesome for your clients, like taking a front seat in both sides. So
hmm
that's perfect. You're also a certified diabetes educator. So can you tell us a bit more about how you decided to go with this specialization?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of just it happened that way, but looking back, I would say obviously it's from my different experiences. Like when I first graduated from my undergrad and became a dietitian, I started working in private practice. And then I was also doing my master's alongside of that. So I was just doing a few hours in the field. And when I first landed my first job, it was in diabetes, and I had done some training in that. So it just kind of happened that I ended up specializing a bit more in that. Looking back, I think the reason I enjoyed that field so much was not only obviously just the experiences and sort of what life had, to offer, but I think it's really the complexity of the disease, the role that we play as dietitians and diabetes educator in the education piece to really empower clients to manage their own disease. Like we refer to it as self-management, because ultimately it shouldn't be your medical team that manages it. You should be a very important part in this and deciding like how do you want to manage the disease. And a lot of the treatment comes down to lifestyle changes. So I think the complexity of the disease, the education piece, and then most importantly how there's such a important like behavior change component, and sort of acting as a coach alongside the clients to help them in making changes and maintaining those changes, I find is so rewarding. So it's definitely a space that I very much enjoy. And I've kind of expanded now to more like chronic diseases, which it might involve diabetes, but it might also involve like weight management or obesity, heart disease, or high cholesterol. And so I think all of these kind of conditions fit in the same sort of, or at least my role in managing these conditions is kind of the same, where it really helps support clients in those lifestyle changes.
Yeah, for sure. Like you find out you have diabetes or something else along those lines, like you said, high cholesterol,
hmm
and then all of a sudden you're routine has to totally change if you
Mhm.
want to stay out of the hospital, right? So you kind of help support that. So that's where your hands-on approach comes in too, right? Like you kind of show them how to make meals and how to make these lifestyle changes. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And I think the key part too is like, yes, it's when the diagnosis arises, but I try to take very much a preventative approach too. And I hope that, people can see the role in a dietitian and not just, just like you wouldn't necessarily go see a therapist once you have a crisis, but like more and more we see people seeking support from therapists to just improve their mental health and be in a better place. It's a similar thing with a dietitian. You don't need to have a condition. You can seek support to help in just improving your health habits to prevent health conditions from developing, especially those chronic diseases. So, yeah, my practical approach very much has to do with, how do we make these changes happen? Because ultimately, having worked in very many different fields and with very many different clients, most people know what to do, right? They know what's quote unquote healthy. Like they know that fruits and vegetables are important, fiber, protein. Of course, there's maybe a little bit of confusion and lots of information out there, but generally speaking, we sort of know what a healthy diet looks like. It's more so how do we make that happen when I have kids' activities in the evening or like my partner doesn't like this and my kid only likes this. And like, how do you make one meal for the family within the 20 minutes you have that actually does reflect those healthy eating guidelines? I think that's where I really come in.
Yeah, that's super tough. Like just eat your vegetables isn't enough of a statement to kind of carry you through that, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I found. So when I graduated, I did a lot of like I covered for different maternity leave. So I took different like 1 year contracts. So I got a lot of experience in different clinical areas. And that's where I felt like there was a bit of like a gap in the sense of there's only so much you can do in an office with a client, right? Like you can tell them how to eat more fiber, what food sources, but then you end up pulling up like images of like this product and this, and it becomes really hard to truly teach them how do you make that happen sustainably. So that's where I started doing more cooking workshops and, sessions in the kitchen where I really help people and show them how do you actually like meal prep for the week in a way that's simple that doesn't require tons of equipment or skills, and that you have these healthy options available without paying the cost of like ready-made food or without you know trading the nutrient content from pre-made foods from like a company or anything like that.
It sounds like it's a lot more fun too. Like I know people go on date nights to like make
Mhm.
food and like make a recipe. So I feel like this is a lot more immersive and like gives a good like afterthought, like a
Yeah.
positive spin on whatever's happening in your life.
And that's my goal, is to make it fun, right? So I run these workshops once a month and they're called mocktails and meal prep. So you prep a little drink, a mocktail of your choice, although we usually have a specific recipe that can be adapted, and then we meal prep together. So I pick the recipes and send the grocery list ahead of time, and I show you how you can modify that to fit your family's needs depending on your preferences, the sales, what you have at home already. And it helps to show people how prepping food does like can be fun, especially as a group. You have the accountability, and oftentimes when I ask people about food, they're just like, oh, like dinner, what's for dinner again? Right. So it's like, how can we shift that? Because going into it with that mindset is not really helpful to us. But how do we go about it knowing, we all have to eat, so might as well eat healthy and make it fun and enjoyable. So I really do try to put in that like positive spin to it.
Yeah, I like that mocktail thing. It's
Yeah.
like also like an episode of MasterChef or something.
Yeah.
Like everybody get together, we're gonna do this. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so how do you approach making personalized meal plans for clients?
So obviously as a dietitian, I need to go at it with an evidence-based approach, but I also like to really look at it holistically. And I think that's one of the things that our healthcare system right now maybe struggles with a bit more in how it's structured of, there's a lot of clinics for like specific conditions, especially chronic conditions, but the reality is you can't really isolate one condition, right? And I teach that to my students a lot where yes, you have to learn to manage a condition, but you also have to look at like diabetes doesn't usually come on its own. You might have diabetes and high cholesterol, and, maybe you have decreased kidney function. So, like, how do you manage all of this? And then you add to that some barriers of like, again, like your husband doesn't eat broccoli and your kid, like, has celiac disease. Like, how do we really look at it from a holistic perspective and figure out how we take the science and put that into your reality? And I'd say that's really how I've come to specialize is like, yes, it's in the more practical approach, but really in dealing with those more complex situations, which we all have complex lifestyles, right? So how do we really implement those changes in that scenario in a way that considers all these moving parts?
I'm just trying to think like if I had diabetes or something along those lines, and then other people had allergies or like you
Hmm.
said, didn't like broccoli or something
Yeah.
like that, like I would be so more than willing to just put that burden on someone else.
Right.
Like, like please make me a meal plan. Like that's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some common myths then about nutrition that you think more people should understand?
Hmm. I mean, I don't know if that's like a myth or not, but a common belief, I guess, that people think is they often label foods as good and bad, right? Like, oh, like this is good, this is bad. And, we often associate, like, especially when we think of the messaging on like social media and just in our environment, we sometimes demonize certain foods. And then, other foods are seen as like the best thing ever, like protein. There's a big protein crave. And although, protein's beneficial, it's not more important than like carbohydrates. I'd say all foods fit and all foods are important, regardless of if it's a cookie or a carrot, but like some provide more nutrition and there's not conditions, but um like it depends on the intent behind it, right? So if I'm out with friends, like, I don't need to go for the carrots, but maybe the cookies is more appropriate, especially if everyone else is having it. But if I'm hungry and, I'm trying to like prevent hunger from accumulating before dinner time, like maybe carrots and a dip would be a good option, right? So it's all about the context. And I think in today's age, like we tend to have these very polarized views, and that's what's trendy, right? But it's realizing that all foods do fit, and once we remove those labels, it really helps to have our food decisions be driven by like what our bodies need, what we like feel like having, rather than these external factors like what we think we should have or what someone said was good, or because then we just feel this extra pressure of having to make like the best and the only good decision.
Yeah, like only eating healthy foods all the time
Mhm.
probably makes you crave those other bad foods more
Yes.
too, right? So,
I always give this analogy of like, don't look in the corner. And you're like, what? Like, of course I want to look in the corner. So it's like, what if I tell you like these foods are bad? Like, don't have them. Like, it just makes them more desirable.
mhm.
And so of course you're gonna eventually like quote unquote lose motivation and fall for that, right? And people fall into this like guilt and shame cycle of like, I wasn't able to maintain this diet, but that's just how our human brains work, right? If we're deprived, especially from a physiological level, like if our cells don't get the energy and the nutrients it needs, it will swing back the other way with really intense cravings and intense signals. And we interpret that, we try to silence that, when in reality we need to listen to it and work with our body and seeing like, how can I nourish it better rather than removing these fun foods.
The brain is a funny thing. Like, how come I can't control my thoughts? What the heck?
Right, that'd be nice.
I know, right? Okay. What about giving people like habits or options when it comes to trying to live their life in a more healthy way? Like, how
Mhm.
do you help them do that?
Mhm. Obviously, my business is cooking with Kat. It's cooking along with me, which, deep down is like, how do we cook more at home, right? Because in our modern age, it's like we're busy, we don't have much time, energy, and I get that. And I mean, I feel it too, right? But how do we prioritize cooking as part of that? Because I think a lot of solutions come out that remove that burden, which, is fair on the short term, but it's not overly sustainable from a financial perspective, from like a health perspective as well, because a lot of these ready-made foods don't have your health in mind, right? Or might not be personalized to your needs, like a meal kit. There's benefits to that. But if your family has different needs or if you need leftover the next day, like I hear that a lot where there's kind of a gap there. So ultimately it comes down to we probably all need to cook at home at some point in some capacity, whatever that looks like for you. So how do we do that in a more practical way, right? And that's really where I can come in to help support them in making those healthier choices. If you can prep a few things, a few vegetables, if you can cook a batch of chicken and then you at least have a protein to add to your bag salad, like those are all little ways that you can make healthier choices without having like an overnight shift.
Okay, nice. And let's go back to the research that you're exposed to every single day
Mhm.
with your job. How do you translate complex findings in that research to your clients?
I mean, I think it's understanding like the fundamental behind it. I also feel like it's not because it's science and it's been published that it's necessarily applicable right away in the clinical space. So, we look at different types of evidence, right? And we look at different levels of studies. So, for example, like if there's one study that looked at 20 individuals or 20 males, we can't just take that information and say that everyone needs to do this because they had positive findings, right? And I think that's where like there's a bit of misinformation online too, because people are like, this is backed by research, but they're not actually interpreting this research properly. So I think it's about looking at like what are the guidelines, what are the meta-analysis saying that consider like multiple studies in multiple settings, that consider also what are the limitations of these studies because we can't control for a lot of things. And then, breaking that down into what's realistic and what could that look like in a day to day. We see a lot of studies lately on like ultra processed food and how they're associated with like negative health outcomes. And I can see like as much as that reinforces the importance of making healthier choices and eating more whole foods and cooking more at home, I think that is often interpreted in a way where it's like if I eat these goldfish, like something bad will happen, right? And I see both extremes. So I think it's understanding like the what does the research truly mean? Like what does an association mean? It just means that it increases your risk, but it's not a cause and effect, right? So that's sort of what I try to share with clients of how do you truly interpret that information with caution.
I feel like that's a huge thing. Like a lot of research is one, the papers are super long.
Mhm.
Two, like it's a little bit boring to read. The language is a little bit hard to understand if you haven't been in school for science for many, many years. So
Mhm.
I'm sure having someone else step in and be like, okay, XYZ is actually the case. Like the population was small and it's only to the parameters of like men. So,
Mhm.
it's nice to have that other voice in there. But that being said, are there any recent research papers or studies that came out that have shifted the way that you counsel your clients
Mhm.
recently?
I mean, I can't speak to like one specific study, but I would say I've really leaned into more like looking at more of the research around more of the like teaching kitchen kind of culinary medicine approach, which is really what are the benefits of teaching people in the kitchen ultimately of taking that practical kind of hands-on approach. And there's lots of evidence. I mean, obviously there's not like tons of research that has been done, but of the research that exists, we see that it helps people in consuming more fruits and vegetable, becoming more confident in the kitchen. It increases what they call like self-efficacy, which is like the ability obviously of like, managing the kitchen and like recipes and that kind of thing, and ties into the confidence piece. So we can kind of see the positive impacts that it has beyond just the traditional sort of education that's done with a handout and you only take so much out of that conversation. And in my opinion, you also get like the benefits of while you're being taught, you also like leave with food, right? So there's like that fun component too. So I've really been leaning into that kind of research, which helps shape my business really in my practice in taking that approach, seeing sort of the effects for myself and seeing how it can benefit clients.
Yeah, I can see how confidence can be like hugely motivational in that setting as well.
Mhm.
You've already done it, so you can do it again. It's not that hard. I mean, it's not as scary.
And a lot of people think like, and that's the influence of diet culture, right? That you need like a very major shift for major results. So, like, if you want to lose weight, for example, like, you can't just add more veggies to your plate. Like, you need to make something huge. Like, what can I cut out? I need to start exercising 5 days a week. And they tend to take this like very intense approach that is not sustainable. Instead, it's like imagine if you could just like spend 15 more minutes once a week in your kitchen. Like, I think people forget about those small shifts that can actually, although, not everyone loves to cook, like that small shift that can seem like nothing can actually make quite the difference. And that builds momentum too. So that's sort of my approach of how do we improve your eating habits, but in a way you can maintain, which is truly key.
Yeah, yeah, slowly and surely. Like I feel like if you just cut something out, your brain feels like it's a punishment again, and then you just
Hmm.
swing the other way. So,
And
yeah.
I see that, time and time again, like the yo-yo dieting of trying something and falling off and going back. And truly it impacts like self-esteem at the end of the day. It creates issues with weight because oftentimes you lose weight, but you regain more because your body's feeling deprived. So it's kind of contributing to our society's view and to the diet culture mentality. So instead, like my mission is really to shift that to create a more positive environment around food, to remove the guilt around food choices and really help people lean into like what is your body telling you? What do we know is also healthy and how do we make that in a very manageable way?
hmm And what challenges do you think dietitians are facing today by promoting healthy eating habits and preventing chronic diseases?
Misinformation.
Okay.
Truly. I There's so much information online and either people are influenced by like non-evidence-based information where there's a lot of like education and undoing, unlearning to do, or there's complete confusion. Like I find it's like either one or the other. It's quite rare that people come to me like really knowing how to make sense of this all. So I find we're constantly fighting, that misinformation online, which makes our job fun in some way. It's frustrating in others, but I think that's what's so rewarding when you really see someone click. And when I meet with clients and they tell me like, wow, like I actually started paying attention to my hunger fullness and like by eating more frequently, I'm actually feeling a lot more, not necessarily full, but like satisfied throughout the day, more energetic. Whereas before I was like cutting out food and feeling hungry all the time. And seeing that mentality shift in like seeing what foods they can have more of rather than cut back and seeing their relationship with food improve and them finding time in the kitchen, like that's truly so rewarding and worth fighting against like that misinformation.
Yeah, for sure. Like
No.
society for a long time has been like, eat this diet with two boiled eggs a day and like a
Yeah.
bottle of wine. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Are there any innovations or future shifts in nutrition or diabetes in specific that excite you or kind of motivate you
Mhm.
right now?
I mean, when we look over time, like things have really shifted. I see that a lot actually when I teach of like, what's been taught 5, 10 years ago and like how are we teaching now? When it comes to the approach with clients, like especially for in the weight management space, so much of is evolving. Diabetes is all evolving a lot with like all the new medications. And taking more of that personalized approach with clients and really moving away from calories. Like I we I say we as dietitians, but like myself specifically, like we'll never kind of prescribe a calorie amount. It's really about like how are you feeling in your body? How's your hunger managed? Like really tuning into our ability from birth to be able to determine how much food we need and really tuning into those cues through more of that like intuitive eating approach. So definitely leaning into that. And like I said before, like the practical piece in the kitchen and doing more cooking workshops, hoping to expand more of like in-person services too in the Ottawa area, to help not only have like a fun activity to do with your partner, with your friends, but that can also be educational and, leave with some food for the week.
Yeah, it probably helps with like body positivity, but like I guess nutrition positivity too.
Yeah.
So it's good to have that piece with the education there just to support like we're okay here, we're all safe. Like
Yeah.
so that's really nice. For anybody who wants to improve their nutrition and feels really overwhelmed by it, what's one simple step that you would suggest to kind of get them started?
hmm It's hard to say because like everyone's different, right? But I would just say start where you're at. Like look at what's one thing you could improve that literally takes like 2 minutes, right? Like something that's so simple, it almost sounds ridiculous, but that you could maintain. Like start there. And, lots of different like books on behavior change will say, like, if we think of like atomic habits or tiny habits, like all these books will say that small, and obviously it's evidence backed, but small sustainable changes like 1% change every day will do so much more for you than like a 20% change that you can't maintain and you'll get back to zero, right? So really think small, think of like what's the next thing you can kind of work on and try to move away from perfection and just look at how can I just improve on this in a simple way.
Amazing. Okay. Where can listeners find you or learn a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. My handle's Pouliot RD, so not the most straightforward, but my last name and RD for registered dietitian. And then they can also find more information on my website, so www.cookingwithcat.ca.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kat. This has been
Yeah,
a
thank
super
you.
fun episode and can't wait to look into some healthy recipes.
Yeah, thank you.